According to The Athletic, the Hunger Games vibes are strong in Carolina. Will the odds be in their favor as they face off against the Saints on Sunday? We'll break it all down on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into another crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big thank you to all you everydayers out there making Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. Our host today, we are joined by the one, the only Julian Council at Julian Council on your favorite social media. I am Ross Jackson at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media. I'm the host of Locked On Saints. Julian here, host Locked On Panthers, and we are here to break down what is sure to be an exhilarating matchup between two very, very good football teams. Today's crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and enter the promo code LockedOnNFL in all lowercase for a first deposit match up to $100. On this episode, we're going to be breaking down what each of these teams needs to do to get a win. We'll talk about whether or not we're aiming too high in that conversation. We're going to be taking a look at matchups that could potentially decide this game, but get started, of course, with the biggest story for each of these teams. So, Julian, dare I ask what the biggest story for the Carolina Panthers is this week going up against the New Orleans Saints?
Oh, I don't know, Ross. Apparently, it's Dysfunction Junction here in Carolina yet again. The Athletics, some outstanding reporting from Joe Person, who's Carolina Panthers beat reporter, and from Diana Rossini, who recently joined The Athletic, discussing the dysfunction within the organization. They talked to over 20 sources who said that it's a Hunger Games type culture at Bank of America Stadium. I know the Hunger Games is currently popular again in pop culture because of the new movie. But man, that is not what you want to hear about a 1-11 football team. But I guess it's not that surprising when you consider that they fired Frank Reich a week and a half ago, that Bryce Young's development has not really been developed so far. Like there has been no developing. That's been a problem for the Carolina Panthers. So that's been the biggest story. There was inside to David Tepper telling Frank Reich, hey, you need to work on Bryce Young's footwork. Okay, owner, why are you interrupting the season by telling the coach that he needs to work on specific things with the quarterback? That's because he was told by the general manager and some other offensive coaches that, hey, we really need to do something about Bryce Young's footwork. So the whole dysfunction there where the GM and other coaches are going behind Frank Reich's back, or were going behind Frank Reich's back to go talk to David Tepper, of the fact that there was coaching staff members that wanted to bench Bryce Young, and that conversation never got to Frank Reich or to Scott Fitter or to the owner. That's healthy, of course. And it feels like, in hindsight, the all-star coaching staff, put that in quotes, that we talked about, the experience wasn't good after all, considering the fact that, well, the offense has been terrible, but Frank Reich hired a lot of guys that he had not worked with before. And it seems like some of those guys that are still there were going behind his back. And that kind of leans into the Hunger Games culture there at Bank of America Stadium. So, yeah, things are on fire here in Carolina.
Yeah, right. Everything's going great, it sounds like. I don't know what you're talking about. So is the idea that if the Carolina Panthers are the Hunger Games that Frank Reich volunteered to distribute, or was that more of a, like, he just got eliminated kind of a situation?
I suppose. I guess he's from District 14 since he wore the number 14 back when he played. I know there's only 13 districts. 13 was wiped out. Well, I don't want to ruin it, but I guess you probably already read the books by this time or saw the movies. I don't know.
You have heard the extent of my Hunger Games knowledge in the one joke that I made. Well, that's about it for me.
Yeah, I guess he volunteered as tribute. Because otherwise, I don't know why someone who left the Irsay situation would willingly come to Carolina to enter into the Tepper situation.
Right.
Another over-involved owner who is running his organization to the ground. Now, the Colts have had success, actually. Like, they're pretty good this year with Shane Steichen. And even with Jim Irsay and his issues, they've been able to have winning seasons, where that has not been the case at all here for David Tepper and the Carolina Panthers. So I suppose he volunteered as tribute. But as we know, at the Hunger Games, there can only be one victor, and I don't think any of the victors
who's winning. I don't know.
I don't think anybody on that staff is going to be here moving forward.
Yeah, that's a tough one. At least like with the Colts, they kind of just relegated Irsay to like a loud Twitter user, and that's kind of all he is now. Whereas like Tepper is putting his hands in too many things. That's wild to hear that he was like going to the head coach, be like, "Hey, we got to work on footwork." And that's coming from people who could also just work on the footwork if they wanted to. I don't know. It's all very strange. Yeah. So for me, like looking at the big story for the New Orleans Saints, the big question is like, is Derek Carr actually going to play this week? Because he, for the third time this season, got knocked out of a game, took another hard hit, concussion protocol for the second time within 4 weeks, second time in a month. He has kind of dealt with, he had the AC joint shoulder injury up against Green Bay earlier this season, played the next game against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, did not look great, came back after the concussion protocol, had the bye week in between. So it's not super relevant in that case, but, didn't have the strongest game against the Atlanta Falcons with the pick six and then the other turnovers and stuff like that. But right now it looks like Derek Carr might play, which is kind of wild. We saw him out at practice today on Wednesday, throwing, running, like doing the whole thing, like not off to the side, not like he was doing what you would usually see Derek Carr do on any day. So it looks like he might play. I just don't know if that's going to be for the benefit or the detriment of the team. I guess we'll have to see. But in any case, he still has the clear concussion protocol. He's not there yet. But the activity that we saw him in on Wednesday in practice kind of gives you a pretty good idea that he's probably going to clear concussion protocol before this game.
Okay, that's good. Good to hear that he's going to clear. Not good to hear that he's back in it for, you said, the second or third time this season.
Yeah. And the second time in 2 months, or second time in a month, excuse me.
Yeah, that calls into question whether you should play at all the rest of the season, knowing how serious concussions obviously are and how our awareness has certainly been heightened over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. How have Saints fans felt about Derek Carr? I know that he was a target for this staff early on when they came to Carolina, but they decided, and I that was the right decision. Let's just go with a rookie quarterback instead of tying themselves to Derek Carr, even if it wouldn't be for a long term. How are folks down in New Orleans feeling about Derek Carr?
Yeah, I think that there are the people that showed up that were already Derek Carr fans that are still like holding out that like Derek Carr would be better in a better offensive system. And I don't actually disagree with that. And then there are the people that were already Saints fans that, kind of saw their team inherit Derek Carr or sign Derek Carr, who are a little bit less patient, right? And who are very unhappy in terms of what the performance has been so far. The team as a whole has not been able to be, not only this year, but last year too, anything what they promised they would be, or they were trying to be going into this year. So what you're seeing is either people who have a lot of patience for Derek Carr, and then people who have absolutely no patience for what they've seen from Derek Carr so far. And there's like very little in between or in the middle.
Sounds like things are going great.
Just
all
fine.
Across the NFC South.
Yeah,
is anyone happy right now? I guess Falcons fans must be happy, but even they have to have some sort of existential dread that it's all going to fall apart because, well, we'll never forget 28-3, and they are the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. Like, it's one of those things to where you've got the Atlanta Falcons at 6-6, you've got the Saints and the Bucks at 5-7, and then the Panthers at 1-11. And I don't think that there's really much of a difference between how Panthers fans feel about the Panthers and how any of the other three teams feel about the three teams fan bases feel about their teams. I don't think the gap is that big in terms of the disappointment of the fan bases and things like that. And that's just nuts. Cause usually when you're talking about, a 1-11 team, usually there's a very, I don't know. We just talked about the Hunger Games. Maybe there is a very different, there's a very different, level of disappointment there, but like, it just doesn't feel like these four teams are separated in their disappointment at all.
No. And I don't even know how much hope there is right now in Carolina. Because I feel like people are probably just trying to make themselves feel better by thinking, okay, maybe David Tepper gets it right this time. but I feel like there's a general consensus that the owner is the problem. So, okay, you have a quarterback maybe, and there's still like stuff of people who believed in Derek Carr and didn't believe in him. That's kind of the same thing here. The folks that wanted Bryce, folks that didn't want Bryce, especially the folks that wanted CJ Stroud and seeing what he's done. Yeah, the vibes are off everywhere across the NFC
the vibes
South.
Are not vibing. The vibes are not vibing. And a lot of Saints fans, I'm going to be honest with you, aren't going to mind a loss to the Carolina Panthers this weekend because they want Dennis Allen out. They want Pete Carmichael out. They want Derek Carr gone. Like, there's sort of this feeling that this could be the game to where if the Saints bottom out and lose to the Carolina Panthers, that maybe things quickly change as opposed to people having to wait for things to happen either over the offseason or potentially not happen over the offseason. So one step closer to that will be the matchups that will make up the sort of result of this game. So that's what we're going to dig into next, because I think that really this game comes down to one area of the field, and it's the run game for both of these teams. We're going to be breaking it down as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. You know, the Carolina Panthers could probably use a little bit of LinkedIn to find their next head coach. Maybe the New Orleans Saints will be in line using LinkedIn Jobs here soon as well, because it is the number one place to hire qualified candidates for any job that you're looking for, whether you're a big company or a small company. But the thing that I love about this is 86% of those small companies, small businesses have been shown to get qualified candidates within 24 hours of posting their job. They know that small businesses, you've always got people wearing so many hats, doing a whole bunch of things that maybe sometimes get in the way of having the time and resources to hire. And so LinkedIn makes sure that you have access to all of that. So go and check them out today. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On Sports Today stream on YouTube, the nation's first national sports 24/7 YouTube stream. Be a part of history. Go subscribe today at Locked On Sports Today. So, Julian, we were talking about sort of the vibes around both of these teams, and they're not great. They're not great around the teams, around the fan base, but both these teams wouldn't mind going out there and getting a win this weekend. How do the Carolina Panthers look at certain matchups maybe to get that done?
Yeah, it would be nice to get a win. It's been so long. I forgot what it's like to feel happiness and joy. And that's really been the case for a while, man. Like the last couple of years, it's just rare that I get to come up here after a game and talk about a win. So that would be nice to do on Sunday. And I feel like, too, from the fan perspective, I don't think there's too many people, because there's not a first round pick, that are sitting here being like, yeah, lose. They're going to end up probably having the first or second pick in the second round anyways. So I don't think it's that big of a factor. But yeah, as far as the team matchups go, well, I mean, honestly, the matchup I'm looking at on Sunday is the clock and how quickly it runs down so we can move on with our lives. Because look, Ross, it's December 7th. Christmas is on the 25th. My Christmas is coming on January 7th when the season is officially over, and we can move on and look forward to the offseason, likely a new general manager, a new head coach. That's the matchup I'm looking forward to watching on Sunday. But as far as the game, since sure, I'll talk about the game here. The Saints are in the bottom third against the run defensively this season. They're allowing 4.5 yards per carry, which ain't great. The Carolina Panthers haven't really run the ball all that well, but recent weeks, especially last week, they started to pick up a little bit of steam. Chuba Hubbard, he's taken over as a lead back. He had the first 100-yard rushing game by a back all season long, first one since last year in that route with the Detroit Lions on Christmas Eve. That's a positive, and that is also why I'm just so confused why on 3rd down and 1 and 4th down and 1, instead of running the ball, the Panthers decided to throw the ball twice, but that's just kind of a summation of the entire season. That's a possibility for them to be able to run the ball well again on Sunday against New Orleans. Looking at the passing offense and just how the offense has been as a whole on the outside and just in that passing facet, it feels like the best path to victory is by running the rock and hand it to Chuba Hubbard. So that's really the matchup we're looking at. The Panthers offensive line getting downhill more against the Saints defensive line, and Chuba Hubbard continuing to run the ball well like he did last week.
Yeah, I'll say that turning the running game over to Chuba Hubbard was like the best decision that the Carolina Panthers might have made all season so far. Like, and maybe that was just me for being like high on him out of his draft class and stuff like that. So maybe it's like it's a draft crush thing. But I always felt like he was the more dynamic guy, and I at least thought that going into the early portions of the season we would see a lot more of him than we saw. So I'm glad that that's transitioned now and that he kind of has that lead role.
Yeah, I felt the same way early on, especially like week 1. He thought he ran the ball really well against Atlanta. Miles Sanders had that costly fumble in that game and just did not look like the same guy we saw last year in Philly. Now, the O-line in Philadelphia is worlds better than the one here in Carolina, and same with the offensive scheme. But yeah, Sanders, that whole deal, he signed for $25 million. Now, only $11 million of it was guaranteed. So it's really, he got $11 million because there's no way he's back next year. Deuce Staley, he got kicked out the door a week and a half ago.
Right.
He's the only reason he was here. He's out here preaching this running backs matter, which is nonsense. So buy Deuce, soon buy Sanders. Because that's just, come on, dude.
Like, oh, surprise, surprise, the running back coach is petitioning for the running backs.
I mean, come on. Like, it was so obvious who wanted Miles Sanders here in Carolina. I know fans want to place it on Scott Bitter, and by all means, he's the one who probably agreed with his agent. I definitely is the one who agreed with his agent for the amount of money that they gave him. But who actually wanted him on the team? I'm gonna guess it was Deuce Staley and of course a little bit of Frank Reich. Yeah. So yeah, man, it's cool. I guess great development that Chuba Hubbard's running the ball well, but you saw that last year that Chuba Hubbard could get it done when he had Deontay Foreman. You didn't have to go out there and spend $11 million guaranteed on a running back. They did that, and that running back is now a backup. So yay.
Oh boy, rough. Hunger Games, as they say. For New Orleans, I think it's all about the run game too. I really do. I think this game is really all about the run game. If New Orleans goes out there and is able to run the football against what has been, a run defense in Carolina that has been very impressive, right? 4.2 yards per carry, I believe that they're allowing. So the Saints defense and then the Panthers run defense kind of in similar classes. And so to me, it's about whoever is able to run the ball most effectively and is able to get the explosive plays out of it. And Dennis Allen, the New Orleans Saints head coach, described the New Orleans Saints identity on offense as being an explosive offense, which is a sentiment that I disagree with. I think that they're a chunk play offense. I think that they pick up a lot of yards, but to me, an explosive offense scores points, puts points on the board. And so I think that what I'm looking for from the New Orleans Saints during this game is, can they run and generate those explosive plays? Explosive plays in the run game generally designated as 15 or more yards, but also get into the end zone. To me, that's the other big thing here. Now, the Saints were 4-4 in the red zone last week. They just had unfortunately dug themselves in a 24-0 hole in the first 7 minutes of the game. So going 4-4 in the red zone didn't really help them out as much as it needed to. But what we also saw was late in the game, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 6, 4th and 6, with time on the clock, with timeouts in your pocket, pass, and just eliminating the run game, getting away from the run game a little bit too early. I need to see the New Orleans Saints not do that. What we're seeing right now from New Orleans is kind of this comedy of errors over on offense. Every game, there's something new going wrong on the offensive side of the football. And I feel like if you're building your identity through Alvin Kamara, who's probably your best playmaker on offense that's going to be available this week, knowing that Taysom Hill's dealing with injury, knowing that Rashid Shaheed's still dealing with injury, Chris Olave is obviously in that conversation as well. But just knowing that you can rely on Alvin Kamara in several different areas of the game, I think that that's who they need to lean in on. So for me, it's all about Alvin Kamara versus this Carolina Panthers defense. If they can extend drives and stay on the field, then I think that they can come away with a win here. How far does that move the needle for them? Not very far, but it's better than a loss.
And I think another thing from the Carolina perspective that people will be looking at on Sunday is Jase Horn. He played. He was on a pitch count on Sunday. That was not something that was known to people going into the game. I did find it a little bit interesting, especially when, as soon as the Panthers took the lead on Sunday, they only held it for 10 seconds. As Mike Evans went 75 yards, basically untouched into the end zone. And that was a play where Jase Horn, who would have been lined up on him, was not out there. We didn't see Jase for the rest of the game. And I know things are different for everybody. Austin Corbett, who's out for the season with an MCL injury, had surgery last week. When he came back after being activated from IR, he played every single snap. Mm-hmm. And for Jase Horn coming out the hamstring, where he has not played since week 1, but with Corbett, we're talking about a guy who wasn't there for training camp, didn't play the first 6 weeks, that it took him until week 8 coming out of the bye for him to finally go out there and play. And he played every snap. I was just a little bit not confused, but it was interesting to me that Horn didn't play the bulk of the snaps, especially when him being out there could have changed the game, as far as that was the big play that was made with him out of the game. So the expectation is from Chris Tabor, the interim head coach, now that he will play a large role on Sunday. It's not just him. Jeremy Chin has been a non-factor this season. He's been reduced to a core special teamer. He came off of IR last week. He played 7 snaps on defense and 22 snaps on special teams. And even before his own injury, it wasn't like he was out there for the majority of snaps on defense. I'm interested to see what that looks like. And he's a player who the Panthers thought they were going to probably build around long term. They brought in Von Bell, the former Saint, to allow Jeremy Chin to play close to the line of scrimmage and be in a playmaking role. And that really has not been the case so far this season. So I wonder what his future is in Carolina. And if there's new coaching, which there could be a new coaching staff next year, but if there's a new defensive staff, because there's a possibility that they could hold on to the defensive staff here. That's what David Tepper wants to do, even though Jero Vero should have some opportunities elsewhere as a DC or probably as a head coach. It will be interesting to see if he decides to come back to Carolina. So that's something I'm looking out for as well. The secondary, J.C. Horn and Jeremy Chin, and how they're utilized against New Orleans, what seems to be a pretty banged up receiving core there in New Orleans on Sunday.
Yeah, no Michael Thomas, no Rashid Shaheed expected. There will be a Chris Olave, so we'll see. I mean, getting to see Chris Olave versus J.C. Horn, that could be a battle for the next few years that we see in this division. So could be very interesting to see that. So it's the run game, and then it's that Carolina secondary up against the New Orleans Saints passing attack. But what do each of these teams need to do to actually secure a victory, and is aiming for a victory too high in this game? That's what we're going to be breaking down as we continue on with the fun episode here on Crossover Thursday. Locked on Panthers, Julian Council, myself, Ross Jackson, Locked on Saints, but Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. In today's episode, this Crossover Thursday edition is brought to you by our friends at Skylight Frame. Listen, Skylight Frame is one of these things where, like, if you've got somebody in your life that you have trouble buying a holiday gift for or something like that, Skylight Frame is the go-to for you that you should go and check out. It's a touchscreen photo frame that you can send photos to straight from your phone, meaning that it's super easy to personalize before you even hand the gift off. You can get photos uploaded, then they're able to change them and stuff like that. It's really, really cool. The touchscreen makes it super easy as well. So it's awesome. And it's beautiful for the home. You can find a bunch of different frames and styles and stuff like that. Awesome stuff to match a bunch of different styles for your home. Really, really cool. So make sure you go and check them out. They even have a really, really cool guarantee as well. They're so confident about Skylight that they offer a free 120-day policy on returns. So you got a long time for them to be able to figure out and make sure that they like their gift. So as a special limited time offer for all of our Locked On listeners, you're going to get $15 off of your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/lockedon. That's $15 off of your purchase of a Skylight Frame just by going to skylightframe.com/lockedon. That's skylightframe.com/lockedon. All right, everybody, wrapping up this Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, breaking down Sunday's big matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the Carolina Panthers. We've kind of been approaching this game with a little bit of levity because, look, neither of these teams have lived up to expectations. A win for the New Orleans Saints doesn't really move their playoff situation, especially with the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the NFC South. I won't call them rivals. Let's just call them opponents within the division. They're playing against one another. The Saints and Panthers are playing against one another. So this is only going to go as far as it goes. But a win for the Carolina Panthers would go a long way. I'm sure that there's like a confidence building aspect to that. There's a big time impact in New Orleans if the Saints lose to a 1-11 team, no matter whether or not that team is in the division or not. So what do the Carolina Panthers need to do to get a win this weekend? Or is a win like not even something that Carolina is thinking about at the moment?
Well, a few things, Ross. You should be ashamed of yourself.
What did I do?
To sit here and to talk about a win against the Panthers wouldn't mean anything for the Saints and their playoff. Come on, people.
It doesn't.
The playoffs aren't even a reality here in Carolina, and shame on you for sitting there and scoffing at, if the Saints win, it doesn't really do anything for their playoff hopes. It does.
It's
it
not
keeps
going to
them
move
alive.
their playoff hopes.
It's a win. It's a win. It's hard to win in this league.
It's a win. It's
hard to win this league.
I'm not trying to fully diminish it, but the thing for me is that, like, a win for New Orleans is so much less impactful in this game than a loss for New Orleans. Like right now, like you're winning to not lose if you're the New Orleans Saints. Like that's the thing for me when it comes to this one.
So what I imagine fans want a loss because that can mean that
a lot do.
People get fired.
A lot
do.
Yeah.
Y'all need to go, talk to somebody about that. That's messed up. That's wrong. It's a holiday season. You should be.
We got BetterHelp if y'all. If you need
you should be more caring. But yeah, I mean, for Carolina, you can sit here and like I mean, I feel this in a way, but the game, it does matter.
Yeah,
it does. This is his coaching staff that's on their way out the door, and everyone's being evaluated at all times. There's people around the league that are looking at what some of these guys are doing and what their futures could be. Like Thomas Brown is someone who got the opportunity to call plays, had that quickly removed from him, and now he's back in position calling plays. I hate what he did at the end of last week's game. I'm done with Thomas Brown here in Carolina, but I do wish him well. And maybe in the final 5 weeks of the season, he can show something that can help him in his future endeavors. Like that, it's important for him. It's important for a lot of people, but really for the players who have gone through 5-win seasons back-to-back to start off with Matt Rule. Last year, turning things around after Rule was fired, getting to 7-10, but 6-6 when they had Steve Wilkes, what they've gone through so far this year. And you saw last week with Brian Burns getting ejected. He just thought about his emotions, blow it over. And that's a guy who hasn't won anything since he got into the league here in Carolina. So I can only imagine what it feels like every day to go to work and to lose and to be a laughingstock and a dysfunctional organization where your coaches are out here trying to snake each other. Like, that's ridiculous that they're having to be a part of that situation here in Carolina that they didn't bring on themselves. Like, they were drafted to come here. So a lot of these guys didn't have a choice. They
had no word. They had no choice. At all.
So they landed here. They didn't. There's guys who actively decided to join this mess, but there's some guys who didn't have a choice. They just got drafted here to Carolina, and they have had no success at all. It'd be important for Bryce Young just to get some level of confidence. And that was a big thing about that story where coaches were saying, oh, he's not being coached hard enough, because Frank Reich is kind of worried about his psyche. And he's got to have the mental fortitude to be a quarterback at this level, but still, the dude's never lost like this in his life. Right. So I can understand in a way how Frank Reich wanted to coddle him. So yeah, it would be important for them to win. Man, they have only covered 2 times this season, and asking this team to go out there and win a game feels like a tall task. Can we just get a tie or something? Let's just don't lose. If not losing means tying, totally fine to lower the bar for that. A win would be nice for everybody involved. I would love to come up here and talk about a win. It'd be nice to, I guess, sink the Saints. If that's what there's left to play for the rest of the season. I'm sure there'll be that person out there being like, oh my God, we're not going to get the 33rd pick now because we won this game. Guys, they are not going to win 4 games, so it's going to be okay. Yeah. I think you're going to have to win 4 games in order to not get the 33rd picks. I think they're going to be okay as far as that pick goes. But yeah, it would be nice to see them go out there and beat New Orleans and feel good about themselves for a change.
Yeah. One of the things that I said in yesterday's episode of Locked On Saints was that, like, Carolina might not have like the draft position game to play here, but at the same time, like, going out and winning this game kind of proves to some of the players that they do want to stick around, like, hey, there's something worth fighting for here. Like, we didn't give up on you, all those other things. And I feel similarly to New Orleans. Like, New Orleans has some aging veterans on their team, particularly over on the defensive side of the football. And if New Orleans wants to keep those guys in New Orleans next year, and really some of their offensive players like Alvin Kamara, all these other stars, if they want to keep these guys in the building for the next few years, I don't think Alvin Kamara is going anywhere this offseason, but as contracts expire and conversations start to happen, all those other things, the last thing you want to do is be able to have a player look at you and say, well, I would say here, but you gave up on us and you gave up on the season. And I think what we saw from the New Orleans Saints last week in that game against Detroit, 21-0 hole, and then fighting all the way back, they still lost, losing by 5 points, but clawing on their way back the way that they did, which was impressive. I thought that proved that this team hasn't given up on itself. Now, there could be a disconnect between players and coaches. There could be a disconnect, blah, 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 blah. But these guys are at least going out there and playing for themselves. And I think we'll see the New Orleans Saints do that again. I think all that they have to do to win this game is if they can actually win in the run game, if they can control the ball in this game, take care of the ball and not turn it over, which has been a thorn in their side here recently. then I don't think you have to ask for much more. I don't think you can ask for much more because this team doesn't have all of its weapons. This team doesn't have the explosive nature that it wants you to believe that it has, all these other things. But I think that they could win the game by simply doing that and simply playing to the things that make them good and make their great players great. And I think that would prove something to these players on the roster, that there's still something worth buying into here and that the organization's not willing to give up on them. So I feel like this game is just as much about each team winning and losing, and each team maybe proving something to its organization, proving something to its players.
Yeah, and I think for the Panthers, with 5 games remaining, 3 of those are against division rivals. They can somewhat play spoiler here in the NFC South. The other 2 games are against the Packers, who right now are pretty hot. They had a controversial win on Sunday night. Whatever.
To say the least.
I mean, that was insane. The Jags, I think by the time the Panthers play them in about 24 days time, Trevor Lawrence should be back. And I hated to see him go down. So hopefully that would be okay for the Jaguars. So those are 2 games I just don't think the Panthers will win, because I think the Jags are actually a good football team. The Packers are trending up. There's not a single team in the NFC South that's like really trending upwards. It's kind of like fluctuates.
It's the roller coaster, man. Like every time.
So I feel like they can trip into a couple wins. I already said I don't think they're going to 4 games. I do think they'll get to 3. I don't think this is a 1-16 team. I think 3-14 is probably where they're headed, and I do think they can find a way to win 2 of these 3 games against division rivals, and I think that will be the case on Sunday. Just a gut feel, not X's and O's, just a gut feel of I feel I know they're going to win this game on Sunday.
I think, therefore, I am predicting that the Carolina Panthers will win this game. Yeah, no, I don't know. I have no idea where this game is going to go. The New Orleans Saints should absolutely win this game.
Yes,
but will they? You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. It's like, should they? Yeah. Will they? We'll see. So it's either going to be an any given Sunday situation, or it's going to be exactly what we expected Sunday to be type situation. And I think the latter would be really good for the Saints. The latter would be really good for what was a tumultuous scene in the Superdome last week against the Detroit Lions, with the fan base, effectively being absent for the most part. Lots of Detroit Lions fans.
That happened to you? That happens here every week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was odd to see it here in New Orleans, and a lot of booing by this home crowd until things kicked into gear, and then they all rallied around and things got very, very much better. But it's going to be interesting to see kind of what the environment for this game is going to be, for sure. But the environment for this crossover, the vibes here are great. The vibes for the teams that we cover, not so great. So we'll see how things continue to go. But Julian, it was a lot of fun. And if people want to keep up with everything else going on around the Carolina Panthers, getting ready for this game, still another Friday episode on the way with Julian over at Locked On Panthers. And here on Locked On Saints, we're going to be breaking down the game plan for all the everydayers as well, to let you know what it is exactly schematically the New Orleans Saints can do to get a win this weekend. And a lot of this is going to be about the run game. We appreciate you very much for tuning in for another episode in this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We thank you very much for being here as a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.